Hey there, Legal Pagers. Welcome back to another episode of the Legal Paige Podcast. Before we get into today's episode and officially wrap up season 6, I wanted to share some exciting changes with you. So the Legal Paige Podcast is getting and did get a little facelift for season 7. If you're listening to this episode before March 11th, you're actually getting a sneak peek of what's to come on your screen right now. After 6 incredible seasons and 193 episodes, we are saying goodbye to the Legal Paige Podcast, and we are starting season 7 with each week you'll be turning into the Legally Legit Podcast with yours truly, Paige Griffith of the Legal Paige. I'm going to talk more about that change in detail and other exciting news and changes happening at the Legal Paige in the next episode, including the Legally Legit trademark. So for now, make sure that you're subscribed to the show and you have your notifications turned on for next week because, it's going to be a good episode. Today's episode, though, I wanted to do a replay of a recent free training that I did in February for photographers specifically. So if you're not a photographer or a wedding vendor, this free training was definitely for wedding vendors as well and would be extremely good for you to listen to. If you're not in that space, totally, at this point, you can just stop the episode and wait until next week's episode. But there is an all too common issue that photographers are facing right now in the wedding and event industry, and that's with venues and third-party vendors requesting access to images. I'm sure all of you know what I'm talking about here. If you're a venue or a wedding vendor of any other sort, you know what's going on here. This situation can be sticky because it leaves a lot of photographers confused, frustrated, wondering, and other wedding vendors like, what do I do to acquire those photos the correct way in the legal way? Photographers are wondering, what should I do? What are my rights to my copyrighted works? What are their rights as venue owners and third-party vendors? And making these kind of decisions is tricky to navigate. So today, in this replay of my webinar, I'm going to share that entire training so that you can learn as a photographer, specifically what to do when a venue or third party asks to use your photos or uses them without your permission, how to maintain professional relationships with venues or other vendors while protecting your intellectual property, which is those images that you took, and then the hot button issue that I've been seeing across a bunch of various social media platforms, what to do when a venue claims right to your photos because those photos were taken on private property. Oof. We're going to discuss all of the legalities of what's been going on in the industry and then how, as a photographer, to properly and legally share your photos while still protecting your most valuable asset and your business and your relationships with vendors and venues in the future. So without further ado, here is the replay of the Confident Photographer webinar, How to Handle Venue Requests Like a Pro. Hey there, I'm Paige Griffith, your host and an attorney for small business owners. I help online businesses and creatives get legally legit in no time. This podcast is all about the legal and the page behind it. I'll break down and simplify legal talk while providing practical business guidance every step of the way. And after over a decade in the entrepreneur space and becoming a mother, I'll also be sprinkling in tips for running a business and giving you a glimpse behind the scenes of what life's really like. As a gentle reminder and disclaimer, I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. So be sure to seek legal counsel for personalized advice. Welcome to the Legal Paige Podcast. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. If you are new here, hello. Personally, from me, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Paige. I am the CEO and lead attorney here at the Legal Paige. We provide practical, easy to digest legal resources for everyone that are completely free, whether that's on our blog, a podcast, YouTube, Facebook group, social media, and then we also have a contract template shop that is designed specifically for small business owners and creatives just like you. So, like I had mentioned at the beginning, I previously host these free legal classes because I have found that figuring out what you need to know as a small business owner is hard. You don't know what you don't know, right? And it shouldn't be confusing, expensive, difficult to figure out. I want good, easy access to legal education for you all. And I am passionate about making sure that you feel confident with the legal side of your business so you can focus back on what you do best and creating all of the things for your clients. So, one thing I would love for you right now or just sometime throughout this webinar is to screenshot yourself watching it and tag me on Instagram at the Legal Paige. And as always, let me know where you are listening in from the chat. I just love to know that everyone from across the entire United States and some people from other places of the world are coming in to learn. So today we are going to discuss a couple of all too common issues that photographers are facing today with venues or other third-party vendors. So just make sure that you remember every time I say the word venue in this webinar as a photographer, you could use that interchangeably with another vendor requesting photos, okay? And specifically, this is for people in the wedding and event industry and photographers that are wanting to play nice in the sandbox and share images with all vendors involved, but really how to go about that and some of the legal intricacies behind what's been going on in the industry and people getting requests and weird things happening with those requests. So all in all, we're going to go over how to properly and legally share your photos with these venues and vendors when they request them from you. So imagine this. You've photographed a gorgeous wedding at a popular venue, and then the venue asked the couple that you photographed to give them all of the images that you took because you give the gallery to them online at their wedding. And the venue said, we're going to use this for our marketing purposes. So the venue could have also stipulated this in the contract with the clients when they booked their venue. And now you've only found out this when your clients have told you. Or maybe the venue reaches out to you personally and asks you to hand over your images so that they could use them on their website, social media posts, or elsewhere. So I know this has happened to you because it happened to me when I was a wedding photographer before I became a lawyer. And this tricky situation and honestly sticky, and I'm going to get to all these sticky parts here, has happened on more than one occasion. So what do you do as a photographer when you're faced with this issue? And a big question that I hear over and over and over again in the industry is, how do I handle venue or vendors asking to use my photos, or even venues claiming that they have some rights to my photos because it's on their private property, or other vendors saying that they have rights within the images themselves? So let me know in the chat if this type of scenario has ever happened to you. We know it's happened to quite a few photographers and videographers out there recently, as you can see from all kinds of posts that we have in the Legal Paige community on Facebook. And I've also snapped this from other photographer groups that you see. Yes, we have lots of yeses. Hannah saying yes, Katie saying yes, Julianne saying, yep, this has happened to me. So type yes into the chat if this has ever occurred to you, but specifically if a venue has ever asked you to give them the photos that you took at the venue so that they could use them for their promotional purposes. That's it. Maybe there's some underlying things there that they're also asking of you, but if you've ever had a venue request that, put yes, and yes to it being in the couple's contract. Okay, we're going to get to that here in a second. So as you can see, even more screenshots that I took, this situation can honestly arise in a lot of different ways. Like, can a wedding venue demand copyrights to my photos and threaten to not allow me on their property to shoot if I don't sign their demanding contract? A venue stole my images and printed them and distributed them in a brochure that they have at their front desk for the past 10 years. Like, what do I do here? Is it legal and normal for a venue to have in their contract that the photographer has to hand over the rights to all of the images, even though that contract is just between the venue and the client and you're not really involved there? And I want to give my photos I took at a wedding to a local bakery. The goal is getting exposure, so on and so forth. This is a venue situation. Like, what do I do here? So now I want you to type in me if you've ever been contacted by your clients who have said that the venue reached out to them, or put in me if the venue has this in their client contract, which we saw. Yeah, we've got lots of me's. It's the most annoying thing. I'm so sorry. We're going to try to make it less annoying. The goal of this webinar is we're trying to all be kind and all work together really well in the wedding and event industry. We're not doing digs at any type of vendor or venues or anything like that. What's most important here to me is what legal rights are at play and how each vendor or venue or photographer protects those legal rights. So I've got a lot of me's here. We're on the right track. Okay. Today, this is what we are going to focus on. The scenario of when a venue asks to use your photos, but remember that you can also apply all of these lessons and takeaways you learn to another vendor, like a DJ, a florist, a cake baker, a cookie baker, a wedding planner. Wedding planners are, totally at play here because maybe they're the intermediary asking for photos. Really any third party that's asking to use your photos, maybe even a third party to the client. Or if they use those photos without your express permission first, like they snap them from your blog or download them from social media, and then they use them for their own purposes. And again, just a reminder, they are not considered the enemy. That's the last thing that I want to convey. That is not how I roll as a business owner and a previous wedding and event photographer, and someone who loves all types of service providers at weddings and events. Like, I am here to support all of you. This webinar is, of course, focused more on photographers' rights. But honestly, I want this to be a learning lesson for all industry professionals that we can work together while also protecting all of our intellectual property rights. So we will also hit on this very hot button issue that we're seeing more and more. What do you do as a photographer when a venue comes to you or to your clients and you're not in that conversation and says, our venue is private property, so you as a photographer need to hand over all of the images that you've taken that showcase the property, because those are our images to use, because we have rights within those photos. All right, we're going to dive into this issue, make sure you know how to handle it, your rights in these types of situations, and a lot more. Before we get to it, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to drop them into the chat. Make sure you tag everyone in a Zoom webinar so that my legal team that is here can see them. They will answer them from you, or answer them if they can right away in the chat. And then they will also save some for me at the end that I can answer live in our Q&A session at the end. But anytime you guys have Q&A, just pop them into the chat. My team has a whole system of how to keep track of everything, and we will make sure to get those answered. All right, so we've gone over the basics, but we need to address these legal situations that are arising from photographers sharing photos with venues or vendors. Number one, how are your copyright rights being protected in this situation? Your copyrighted works, the images themselves. How do you address and communicate with venues who are wanting to use your work for commercial purposes? And then how to respond to venues and vendors, but mainly venues who demand photos on the basis of private property law. All right. Copyrights. We're going to start there. Basics. I want to first touch on a legal term that I'm sure many of you are familiar with because it's your most valuable, intangible, or tangible too, like digital products can also get printed, but it's your most valuable intellectual property asset, right? So you may know about copyright rights, but I want you to know a little bit more about the ins and outs of this, because the more knowledge that you carry on this subject, the easier you're going to be able to communicate with venues and vendors on this subject, because you can present yourself in a professional legal manner while obviously like still sticking with your brand tone and your needs and your business morals and values as well. So let's talk about copyright rights. To put simply, copyright means for photographers owning your photos. With ownership, your photography business has certain exclusive rights to the photos. So your ownership rights include the rights to do whatever you want with those photographs and images, to edit the photographs and use it for your own marketing and advertising, as long as you have a proper model release, of course, or to make something new with the photograph, like a blog or derivatives of the photograph, or use the photographs for, wedding fairs, shows, things along those lines. 3, to submit the photos for publications to a magazine, as long as you have, of course, proper model releases there. And then 4, to license the photo to others, like venues, vendors, third parties. To get a bit more nuanced here legally, all of this falls under Title 17 of the USC, but copyright ownership is secured automatically when the photo is created for the first time. This means the second that you compose that shot on digital or film and you snap the photo and it hits your memory card or your film, you own the copyright to that work of art. Again, it's automatic, unlike trademark ownership, where you have some common law rights, but really you just need to register. So what I'm saying here is I just want to talk a bit about registration, because sometimes this gets quite a bit confusing for photographers. Registration is not a condition of copyright protection. You own the copyrighted work. However, this changed in 2019 with a Supreme Court case that was decided in Fourth Estate versus wallstreet.com. It was a unanimous decision and ruling that said in order to enforce your rights in court regarding a copyrighted work, you do have to register that work with the U.S. Copyright Office. What does this mean for you? It means that although you have those automatic common law copyright rights under Title 17, and you could say send a cease and desist to an infringer to state those rights and kind of threaten potential legal action, you actually can't take legal action against them in court unless you have that copyright registration in hand from the U.S. Copyright Office, which is easy to do. And if you ever need help in this instance, we do have a sister business called Griffith Swazo Law, and myself and my partner there would be happy to help you with any copyright infringement or copyright registration things. I'm just going to put that out there so you guys have enough, resources at hand. All right. So we talked about copyright ownership. What you might be thinking now is, okay, I know I have these copyright rights, but how do I protect the copyright of all of these images I took at weddings and events? The first thing you want to do, of course, is to protect your copyright rights via your client agreement, right? You want to have a copyright clause with your clients. So you're going to have a model release clause in your, wedding photography contract or destination photography contract or elopement contract this is showcasing all of your images for your own marketing and advertising. You retain copyright ownership. You're giving your clients a personal license to use. Of course, they're probably granting you a model release as well, because you can't use any photos of, people's likeness without a proper model release. But the copyright clause is absolutely imperative in your client agreement. And pro tip here, pro tip from me, and you guys know I'm always just trying to make sure that you guys do this. You cannot enforce a contract that you don't know. Your contract is only as good as your willingness to enforce it, and you're not going to be willing to enforce something that you don't know. And your contract is only as good as the meeting of the minds of all parties involved understanding the contract that they signed. So I will say this until the end of time. Please ensure that you fully explain this copyright clause and a model release clause and its meaning to your clients when you deliver the contract to them prior to them signing, so that they're fully aware of the personal license to use in advance, that you still retain copyright ownership. And this is good to put in your workflow and systems as they are, getting acquainted with you, wanting to book with you, and then before they're reading their contract. It also just goes to show your professionalism. If you know your contract backwards and forwards, your clients are way more likely to sign, because they're like, okay, this photographer knows what they're doing. They have a really good contract. They've easily explained it to me. This is so easy for me to sign. Of course, I'm going to book with them. Remember, though, there is no contract between you as the photographer and any other vendor at this point. This means the only obligations that you have are to the client because you have a client contract in place and vice versa. And the client has a contract with the venue, yes, but that doesn't mean that all of the clauses that that venue put in their contract are valid. Same goes with the client and other vendors. If they are putting similar clauses in their contract, that doesn't mean it's valid. Yes, they might have a clause in there that says you have to share images and those things. We're going to get into that, but it doesn't mean they're valid. What is important for you to know as a photographer right now is that your obligations are only to your client and vice versa. And whatever is the legal language within that contract with them, the client agreement. And speaking of no contract with them, be sure to have in your terms and conditions on your website that you own and retain copyright ownership over all of the images that you post, because you have no contract with any of these vendors. Because say, I kind of alluded to this. If you have a bunch of images on a blog post showcasing the event and then another vendor stumbles upon it, or they find the link because you posted all of your Instagram stories or something like that, they can't then just go and screenshot or download the photos and use it for their commercial purposes. You want to make sure that you have exclusive rights to those copyrighted images. So double down here, not only in your client agreement and in your common law copyright rights, but also in your website terms and conditions, and explain that any images are copyrighted by you and no one can use them. They would have to get exclusive permission from you to do so. Ultimately, here's the rub, right? Here's the thing. What you do with your photos, sharing wise with other vendors, is then a new agreement, an agreement that does not exist unless you have some type of verbal agreement that I don't know about that you've already talked about with these vendors. But it's a new agreement between you and these vendors. And the client, I mean, I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this, shouldn't really be involved, other than ensuring that you have that solid model release clause whereby the client has already given you permission to share those images with third parties, such as these vendors. Yeah, otherwise the client shouldn't really be involved. And I think that is where some photographers don't understand it. The client somehow got put in the middle of all of this. And I don't think it's the best place for them to be, and they really don't need to be involved. All right. So now that you know those two things about agreements, copyright rights, the hot button issue right now, as you saw in our flurry of Facebook and social media posts, is venues claiming rights to your photos because they were taken on private property. What's really legally going on here? Venues are demanding that photographers provide them with photos from weddings and events for their own marketing purposes because the photographers shot those photos and images on their private property. We are seeing venues claim that because they own the private property displayed, that they should get full access to all of the photos that you took while on site, and then they can use them however they want. Or it's a little bit more threatening of language or communications with the venue, such as, if you don't give me the photos for free, we won't allow you to be on our vendor list, or use your images for your own business's marketing purposes, because we can restrict that publicity use due to images being shot on our private property. Here is an example of a venue's private property release policy that we found posted for, the public's consumption on a venue's website. So just look at this here for a second. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to read it if you haven't seen something like this. It's been posted a lot in Facebook groups. Here's a little bit more, and I'm going to point out some things, okay? All right. You will note that the agreement states, in consideration for the property owner granting access and permission for the photographer to shoot, photo, or video, so this is to photographers and videographers, on the private property, once these images are fully edited and shared with our mutual client, aka the couples or the individuals renting the venue space, a copy of the edited digital images will be provided to us in their entirety. Say what? What about our copyright protections as photographers? And then the language continues. For all of the above listed considerations, we, aka the clients renting the venue, grant you full access to the images taken on the property to do what you see fit for marketing, publication, promotion, website content, social media, client orders, etc. And this process matches the contractual release provided to the clients in our general venue rental contract, which stipulates that we will be provided event images to be used, and not only on our website, but all kinds of social media platforms, and really to any type of commercial use that we see fit. This is a really tricky situation that's evolving right now in the industry. And the reason I'm talking about this, I feel like photographers are stuck. It's like you're between a rock and a hard place. Like you want to play nice in the sandbox, but you also want to negotiate your copyright rights without making enemies of clients in particular. That's where I'm like, you don't want to get clients involved, but you don't want to make enemies of venues and other vendors. And like, what do you do? Because you're the one with the images and they all want these for their own marketing and advertising. Here is what some folks are saying in the industry. Okay. I have a couple, they want to do this. We're in busy season. Like, what do I charge for someone who wants to use our photos for marketing purposes? What's a polite way of saying couples don't have the rights to give away images? And if you want to use them for commercial use, you need a commercial photography release and an exclusive licensing agreement or non-exclusive licensing agreement. Like, this isn't just basic general use of my images. Then someone said, like, I booked a wedding that's on a golf course. The planner, this is where the planners kind of are intermediaries here. They sent this over and they're like, sign it ASAP. Like, what do I do? I'm not signing that. And there's like really egregious language in it. Or someone is sending over an image release agreement. I just wanted to like ground this in actual substance here. Like, I'm not making this up. This is like a common thing. This was not something that was super prevalent a decade ago when I was deep in the trenches of wedding and event photography, but it is now, and it's becoming more of an issue. All right, let's break this down. Okay, let's break it down legally. The first issue, whether clients can contractually release the use of photos to the venue. They do not own the photos as long as you have that copyright clause and you have a personal license to use in your client agreement with the clients. And that's 99.9% of the time what's happening. So the clients don't have the right to grant the venue full access to the photos for promotional and other purposes. Even if they think they do, they don't. The only person that venues can contractually agree to get access to your photos is you. And you get to determine that commercial use extent, okay? The second issue is whether private property owners have legal rights to your photos or some type of rights within your photos. This is the tricky topic. So if it's unclear, please feel free to ask questions. My legal team and I have been back and forth on this and jumping on a ton of calls to really boil this down for you all. Property rights and photography. Let me explain. A private property owner may, and I'm using the word may here when we as lawyers use very specific terms, I want you to hook onto that. May, not absolutely do, may have some rights to restrict how you use photos on their property. But again, it's a may because legally speaking, they would then have to pursue legal action against you and be able to prove some elements of trespass because that's where property law is rooted here in their private property rights. You may have even duress like defense claims if they did want you to sign this contract and like they have all the, you've got a lot of legal arguments here. And most importantly, you have implied consent to be on their property via the client signing the venue's contract. Okay. Notwithstanding that, ultimately, what I'm saying is it does not mean that they automatically have ownership or full access to your copyrighted photos, right? Because the venue may not even be displayed in some of the photos that you have. I'm going to get into this a little bit more. Again, if you have questions, just please ask them. But hopefully, if you just digest this right now, it'll make sense once I get through all of it. All property owners, if you have owned private property, you have the right to restrict things happening on your private property, right? That's why no trespassing signs exist. You, of course, have the right to restrict photography and videography on your premises. And then you can control the display of those photos taken there. In contrast, we all know if we're shooting at a public space, such as county, state-owned beach, park, at a public fair, things along those lines, you generally have the legal right to take and use photos freely, and you won't have any copyright issues there. When it comes to private property, though, photography restrictions typically apply unless that event is publicly advertised and open to the general public. So, as we know, most weddings are private events, meaning standard private property rules apply. Here's a comparison here that I think will help you. A similar legal concept applies to state liquor licenses because many states allow alcohol to be served at private events without a license. But the moment that the event, and like obviously you have to have people that are serving and those types of things that have licensure and or, have certification. But the moment that the event is publicly advertised, usually a liquor license is absolutely required. And the same applies here to photography. Even if the event is truly private, the property owner may have some control over the use of the images taken there. But this is the huge but. When a photographer is hired to capture a wedding on private property, they likely operate under massive implied consent from the client because the client has secured the venue for its intended purpose. The venue knows who's going to be there and what is going to occur at this wedding and or event. And the venue has impliedly granted them access for the impliedly granted you as the photographer and videographer access to their property for the purpose of documenting the event. And even if the venue owner were to later, this is all later, usually it's happening. I mean, as we saw, sometimes the planners are involved and it's in the middle of all of it after everyone's already booked the client and the venue, it's like right before the wedding and they're like, sign this release. But a lot of times this is happening after the images are already out there. You've delivered the images, they're edited, they're there. Even if the venue owner were to later claim private property ownership or trespass, or meaning in this instance that the photographer was not allowed to use those photos on their private property for their own marketing and advertising without our consent, proving that as a venue owner would be very, very difficult since the photographer was invited by the paying client and the venue was aware of this. Furthermore, copyright law remains clear. And I think this is where this rub is there's like private property claims, but then there's also copyright rights. Copyright law says that regardless of any disputes over access or private property ownership, the photographer still retains full copyright ownership over the images that they have and they've created, which the venue has already opened themselves up to host events. So the cases that we've looked at regarding this issue focus on privacy concerns and whether the venue has damages and harm. And when I was looking at those cases, then I was thinking to myself, well, it's going to be really hard for a venue to show damages, which is why we probably haven't seen case law very, very specific to this issue. Because on their end, if they were to hire a lawyer, showcasing any harm or damages would probably be very, very difficult from a venue's perspective, right? Because as photographers, if we have these images that are showcasing the venue in a professional and flattering light and manner through your works, that kind of serves as free marketing for the venue and ultimately benefits the venue, potentially attracting future clients, rather than causing any detrimental harm to begin with. So you can see here how like my legal brain was working and I was just like, I really think they have an uphill battle here to claim any private property rights. What does this mean for you? Just because a venue may be able to restrict some type of use of photos taken on their property, but again, I just told you all of the legal reasons why that would be very challenging. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that they have automatic rights to your copyrighted photos. No one gets access to your copyrighted photos without your permission and express consent. And only the clients have that right now with a personal license to use. If a venue demands photos under their claim of private property rights, I really think you have two options and then a proceed with caution option. And I think that's kind of what most people are doing. I think it's one or three. So negotiate. You're probably going to work out an arrangement where you receive maybe a benefit. Like now you're like, oh yeah, this venue isn't like as easy to work with, but I really want to work with them. And this is my morals and values and ethics as a business owner. Like, let's work out an arrangement where it's mutually beneficial for all. Maybe there's a small fee, or maybe there's just crediting rights or preferred vendor statuses. You've seen all of that in Facebook groups. You could just straight up decline and refuse their request. That could mean that you might not be able to shoot at that venue anymore. And that could make it difficult in a vendor circle. But it could also mean that, all right, maybe then I'm not able to use my photos, or I'm in this proceed with caution situation. And that's what I want to talk about next. You could just proceed with caution. So you could decline and then you could still use the photos for your own marketing, but be aware that the venue may take legal action. I really haven't seen it to that extent. Like we're talking here, the risk is probably pretty low. Because I already said you have legal defenses such as implied consent to be on the property, venue's inability to prove trespass, maybe some duress claims. Maybe some intentional infliction of, business interruption. There's a lot of claims here that could be made. So I just want you to know that you have those in your arsenal in under the proceed with caution situation. Again, best case scenario, negotiate. Like everyone ends up winning, or at least winning in some respect. You give them just a few images to use for free. And we'll get to that here in a second. So there's another issue of whether you should require clients to get a property release from the venue for their event. And I needed to touch on this because some legal resources are recommending that photographers include a property release in their contracts with their clients. And it's not something that we have in our Legal Paige contract. So people have asked me this. This is the issue that I have with this. That is why I won't put it in a template contract. I just think you're opening up a can of worms when you do this, because first, it alerts the venues that they could possibly enforce private property rights that they may or may not have, or other rights, meaning an issue wasn't there that wasn't even there is now there. Why do that? Secondly, it just puts your clients in the middle of the situation that they can't and really shouldn't control. The copyright rights are yours. That's not your client's. So you wouldn't want your client to be brought into a lawsuit, or you have to talk to your client about a sticky legal issue because the venue won't sign a release on your behalf, or you won't sign a release on the venue's behalf. Talk about bad customer service. Like, I just don't think clients should be involved at all. So what should you do? My take is when this comes up, you want to work as best as you can. Try to explain your rights to the venue and determine whether you want to work with them on this. Last, let's get into how to communicate legally with a venue when they've asked for your photos. First of all, having a venue come to you and ask for use, in my opinion, is a great thing as a photographer, because it means that they respect you and your work, and they want those images. That's a good thing. I always try to remind ourselves this is a good thing to begin with. And if they are doing it in a non-threatening manner and it's just an inquiry, don't read too far into the language that they're using. If they're really trying and willing to work with you, maybe you both can benefit from this, right? Not everyone, though, wants to share their works with venues or vendors, and that's okay too. I've said this many times, it's your most valuable asset. So if you want to have a boilerplate response in your back pocket on declining kindly, and then what they could do or pay you to do in terms of getting some type of licensing agreement in place, you can do that as well. I just want you to plan how to address this beforehand, so you're not reactionary, but you're being proactive in these measures. That's ultimately what you're getting from this class today. And you could also, though, when a venue is asking of this and maybe you're a hard no for whatever reason, you could offer to do something else, like a branding shoot or a styled shoot at a small discount. This is just ideas here, and I'm just shooting. Everyone can offer suggestions too on ways you've gotten around this, but it's just, I want everyone to work together, right? And I want everyone to not have this issue come up in such a just massive confrontational manner versus let's all play nice in the sandbox. Okay. Legally speaking, you own the copyrights to your photos. When venues ask for those photos, you can respond either formally or in an informal way. So a formal way would be to present the venue or a vendor with a licensing agreement. I'm going to get into the various types of licensing agreements. So I'm trying to go as fast as I can here. And this is the route that, of course, as a lawyer and a small business lawyer, I would prefer you to do, because in a 1.5 page, 2-pager licensing agreement, they're really short and sweet. The terms are clear, right? And then if they misuse the photos in any way, that would be a breach of the contract, the breach of the licensing agreement, and it's an easier claim to be made. Most people, though, would go an informal way. So that's okay too. I'm not saying don't do it the informal way. I'm just going to tell you how to do it properly the informal way. So at the very least, please send the venue or vendor a detailed email describing exactly what they can and cannot do with your images for marketing and advertising purposes. Because if even if you're like super close with the venue, it can get convoluted and confusing really, really fast. And that's where a lot of times it spirals and they start using it for commercial purposes that you weren't intending for them to use it for, besides like their website and social media. And now it's on a huge billboard, or maybe they've done a huge spread in a magazine and you weren't credited, things along those lines. So oftentimes this is the route people want to go. So if you choose to go that route, here's my just screenshot this slide right here. Okay. This is what you would want to include in an email. We have a template email that you can certainly use, and my team will link it here in the chat. But I know, and I use all the time, and so does my whole team, ChatGPT and other AI platforms to write up emails for us that have been trained on our brand tone and voice. So these are the bullet points I want to make sure that you have included. So this is like what you would type in, and you would tell, ChatGPT, write me a friendly, professional opening, thanking the vendor for their interest in using the images. Then a clear mention that you will get access to only the highlighted images or only 5 to 10 images that are copyrighted by me. And you get a limited commercial license to use, which is being granted for use on boom, social media and your website only. There's a requirement here that the photo credit must be given to me in all instances. Here is how I would like that displayed. And a request for the vendor to not share the images with other third parties or use them in any other capacity without your express permission. And then if they do, that an additional fee will just be charged, and you guys can work that out later on. You could also have an optional request for the vendor to specify like where and how the photos will be used to ensure kind of that consistency and potential cross promotion. Of course, you're going to want to like close that email out with appreciation of the vendor's interest and excitement to work on this, image sharing together. Optional, you can snap this as well. And this is what you're going to put into, your AI platform and write up the email. This is the informal route. I still suggest that you get a licensing agreement in place for lots of stickier situations. But if you're doing this informal route, you could also, some people say that they'll charge a licensing fee. Like you can choose 3 images that you would like to use for free. If you'd like to use any more, it's, a small licensing fee would need to be in place there. And then we would sign a formal licensing agreement. So some people just say like, here are the images, maybe you watermark them, you send them to all the vendors, and then you're like, I would charge a licensing fee, and you just need to sign a very short licensing agreement, which would specify all of the allowed usage. All right. So now that we know that, the question is now to fee or not to fee, because I just talked about fees a little bit. Are you going to let the vendor or the venue use your photos for free? You have to decide if you're going to charge them for the use, right? Since you own the copyrighted rights, and I said it was your most valuable asset that you own, know that you can make money from licensing the photos to others. Let's go over the pros and cons of both. Pros. There is a potential for exposure and networking that can lead to future clients and sales for you. It showcases your photography work to potential new clients who book the venue that they wouldn't have seen who you were to begin with, or to other wedding vendors who might recommend you to others. This is the approach I took. I'm not saying it's the right approach. It's just the approach I took. And it allowed me to have a lot more word of mouth and referrals, word of mouth referrals, to be able to book my photography services beyond just my social media and website. You could even require that if you're going to use all these photos and you have an oral agreement in place, or not an oral, but it's kind of a written and an oral agreement. As long as you have email documentation to this effect and the requirement that they tag you and credit you every single time, that could grow your social media, that could grow your clientele. It could also strengthen your relationship or partnership with the venue, which could lead to referrals, as I've mentioned. You could become a preferred vendor. That's a lot of the comments that I'm seeing in Facebook groups. Like, we do this so that we're a preferred vendor. And like, the more we do this, the higher up on the preferred vendor list that we get, because they enjoy having those free marketing materials. And then, of course, just visibility as a whole, right? If a venue is at a popular location for the type of event you shoot, having them display your work on their website or in their lobby, like that's a huge asset for you. Talk about easy word of mouth referrals. But let's go back. Like, if you're not being paid for use of those photos in this capacity, you may be providing the venue or any other vendors with amazing promotional materials and not receiving any proportional benefit from doing that. So let's talk about the cons. Exposure has a potential to translate into paid work, but it doesn't always. It's not a guarantee, whereas someone paying you for the photos is a guarantee, and a guarantee of a monetary ROI there. Handing over your work for free can, in some instances, not all, and I know that there's a lot of schools of thought here, devalue your work in the photography industry. And I just always say here, because I'm sure you've heard from photography coaches, like, what is the precedent that you want to set? You kind of need to know that going into your photography career. You can always change, but like precedent means a lot to other vendors and venues asking for images. Like, what is your morals and values as a business owner? What's the precedent that you want to set from the get-go for free images or paid images? And it's important to consider the magnitude of allowing particularly a venue to use your photos for free, because it can bring in massive amounts of business for them, all based on the hard work and the artistic style and all of the education and like sweat and tears and learning experiences and clientele that you have had, equipment that you have bought. Like, you have to remember, you have put a lot of hard work into your photography business too. You own these copyrighted works. What are you going to do with those images? However, just remember, if they're invoking those private property rights or trying to, they might not accept any kind of fee arrangement. But maybe they could still accept, like, if they're gonna play a little bit of a hardball here, they might accept credit for the photos and maybe other arrangements. So, yeah, providing photos for free as an act of good faith with the venue may create that long-lasting relationship between you and the venue, ultimately resulting in you having more client referrals, but maybe not. Can you guarantee that ROI? There is no one size fits all answer to this situation. And please know that from the bottom of my heart, I am not saying this is like one way highway. Like, it goes two ways, and it goes many, many different ways when you're at this juncture in the road, and you know your business best, right? Like, your friends in a Facebook group that end up having a 50 to 100 comment thread, they don't know your business like you do. They're offering their suggestions based on their experiences. And you know your business best and where you're at in your business journey too. That may differ amongst all of your colleagues in the industry. So, weigh the pros and cons that we've discussed, and then decide whether you're going to give your photos away for free, if that's not in your best interest, whether there will be a fee attached. But lastly, like I've touched on, having a licensing agreement with the venue, particularly, and any other vendors that you feel like, I feel like they're a big enough vendor, like a licensing agreement here is a good idea. Or if there feels like there's any tension in that conversation to begin with, I just feel like my risk and liability meter goes up a little bit as a lawyer, and I'm like, licensing agreement. I'm not just going to do some informal email. I just don't like that for you. So let's go over licensing agreements real quick, okay? It's a great tool to have in your small business toolkit. I always say, like, you want your client master service agreement, client agreement in place, and then you want to have your website terms and conditions, and you want to have some like third-party payer addendums and cancellation rescheduling agreements. This is one of those that you want to keep in your legal toolkit as a photographer. And usually it's a non-exclusive licensing agreement, but really, what is it? It's a business contract between two parties, and usually a B2B contract, business to business contract. The licensor in a licensing agreement is the one who sells or gives a limited commercial license to use. They own the asset being used, and the licensor, that wording is used throughout a license agreement. The licensee is the buyer paying for the rights to use. And this could either be through actual money, another type of consideration like crediting or advertising for by the vendor on your behalf, and then non-exclusive versus exclusive. Non-exclusive licensing agreement is the most common that you will see across the board because it's non-exclusive. If you an exclusive one is like one you give to People, and People magazine is the only one who has that license to use your images, with competitors or like within a confined, constricted realm of that licensure. But a non-exclusive licensing agreement is probably what you're going to be sending out to all vendors in some respect, again, whether that's formal or informal, but we're talking here the four-cornered document. It does not give that vendor the sole use of the photos. Rather, it allows you to still retain the freedom to then transfer, sell, share, promote your photos with various derivative uses and give them to other vendors for multiple reasons. The exclusive one, again, like I said, is that the venue or that specific vendor would have the sole right to use the photos, and could restrict your use of the photos or your right to license to others. And this is an agreement I would just never have someone sign without a significant fee attached to it and a time period of when it expires. So it's very, very constricted in an exclusive licensing agreement. So time and money are definitely at play. You probably see this more in the celebrity, and more like well-known clientele world, where they're asking for NDAs and exclusivity, and then there's an exclusive licensing agreement in place and a huge fee attached to it. Licensing agreements, in my opinion, though, are a great option to establish that legally binding agreement with the venue. It's just a great networking tool as well. It's because it helps you display your photos in a very professional manner. Here's some things that I do want you to consider with licensing agreements. When you're looking at a licensing agreement, you have to establish ownership of your photos. Make sure that there is language establishing you, the photographer, as the copyright owner of the photos. Yes, you already have copyright rights. And particularly if they are looking for 5 images and there's 5 images that are really important to them that they are willing to pay a fee for, go register those photos with the U.S. Copyright Office, so that you have federal registration with them, but also common law registration with them. And this is important because it will set the tone, and in an actual legal document and legal language, it protects your rights as the photographer should another third party infringe or use photos without your permission that they got from the person who has licensed them. Then in your licensing agreement, you have to define scope of usage. Again, you guys, I do all of, if you're looking for a licensing agreement, we do have those. But I want to walk you through, like, if you have one of these documents already existing, just make sure that you're checking these boxes and making sure that the licensing agreement looks like this. So I'm just kind of hand holding you through this document here. What is the scope? We've talked about the scope, but which photos can the venue use? Which photos can they not use? Make sure that all parties are on board with what definition of the ownership that you still retain as the photographer and their limited commercial license to use. Crediting, restrictions you want to put in place, such as not allowing the venues to use your photos without a watermark or credit, or like, can they use them on social media with a tag, but if they use it elsewhere, there's an additional fee involved. All of those things would be under the scope. And then pricing, what should you charge? I haven't looked at the comments yet because I've been trying to make sure that we get through this as efficiently as possible. But my legal team was like, people are going to ask questions about pricing. We need to talk about pricing. So let's take a look at a question just like this that was posted in our community. Hey, what would you charge for image use like this? Is it per image? What kind of contract do I use? I've just never had a venue ask this before. Look at these answers. 0, 1,500, 2,400. I wouldn't charge, but maybe you should. And a licensing agreement is a good way. 650, nothing. I mean, this went on and on. It was like $35, $50, $1,500, $2,500. It was just, the gamut was wide. So no, again, this is not a one size fits all solution. You must decide and clearly state the fee that you would charge a venue to use your photo. It can be your full retail price, or sometimes they'll charge a discounted rate in exchange for publicity that comes from the venue's use of the photos. Or you could even, like I said, negotiate a non-monetary fee and put that in the licensing agreement. So yeah, like maybe they're promoting you, maybe they're doing a little bit more for you. They're promoting you specifically in packets to potential clients, and like your business card gets put on like the front page of that packet. I'm just like coming up, I've seen things out there. Like you can get really, really just creative with this on how you could maybe be a bigger, more preferred vendor than others if you are giving them more images than they would expect, or if they aren't willing to pay. And then time limits here. There are some things. How long do you want the licensing agreement to last? Is it in perpetuity? Is it only for a year or two? Do you want to automatically renew the agreement? Lots of times licensing agreements are only for a year or two. Non-exclusive might be in perpetuity. But do you want to reserve your right to negotiate later on? That's all included in a licensing agreement here. Other options, I briefly mentioned this. I'm just going to say it one more time. You could arrange for a styled shoot that allows both of you to make sure the photos are exactly what you both want. This also allows the venue to like control things, like settings, locations, use, setup. And it also then gives you the control to create more stylized shots that you wouldn't necessarily be able to create in the middle of a busy wedding or event that you're shooting for the client's intended purpose and not the venue's intended purpose. And so there's some quid pro quo there, and maybe there's a fee attached there, right? Like, if any other vendor that you would go to take photos of, or if you're doing a brand shoot, like they're gonna pay you for your artistic work and for your copyrighted work. So, something to consider. Trader collaboration, like in the fee and the licensing agreement, you can be really strategic there on what that trader collaboration is looking like. And the last thing is watermarked images. I didn't talk about that too much, but you could choose to just provide in your highlight images that you're sending to everyone watermark images. And those, it's like you get to choose 3 of these that you can use. We'll sign an agreement. We'll attach those 3. If you want to use more, a fee would be an additional fee would be charged. And here's what that is. Best practices and negotiation tips for you all legally. Always make sure that you retain copyright ownership of your images, and you say that, and you say it, and you say it, and you say it. And like I said, if you are having issues with copyright infringement at all, you can always reach out to myself and lawyers at my law firm. You can shoot us a message. We're happy to discuss this with you and hop on a consult call. But just know that the Legal Paige is not a law firm. We're just a legal education platform and contract shop. And we can either help you with our law firm, or we have lots of referrals in other states as well that we can send you to a lawyer who would be able to assist you in that respect. Then make sure with negotiation that you're clearly outlining licensing terms before sharing any photos. If the venue wants to use your images, please discuss compensation or an alternative exchange. Ensure proper credit if images are being used for free, and have a standard pricing sheet for image licensing ready, because I think that question comes up and then you're even more confused and reactionary because you don't know what to charge. If you can just go and digest all of this information and be like, what would I charge a venue to use it for X purpose? What would I charge a venue to use that image for clients booking? And yeah, like at the end of the day, know when to walk away from an unfair deal. You don't have to do anything that you don't want to. You own the rights to your images. So if you're uncomfortable in any way and it doesn't feel right, you can walk away from an unfair deal. That happens all the time in the legal world when you're in negotiation. Also, if you want to provide a venue with your photos to use in any capacity, just make sure that you provide the venue with a stack of business cards that they can make available to their clients, even if it's in an informal way in email. Like, remember that there is power in just giving things to people, but that doesn't automatically mean that they're definitely going to present you to people as to potential clients as you intend. Sometimes you can do this nicely and kindly, like 3 times in a row. The serve, hit them with something. You could serve, and then be like, here's some collateral that I've scratched your back. Can you scratch mine now? Just remember that that's really important in the business world. Last thing, what if this situation happens? If a venue uses your images or another vendor without your permission, and you don't now want to enter into any sort of agreement, right? The weird feelings are coming up, not a good, it's just, you don't like this. Fee or complimentary, it's a hard no, because you don't want to allow them to continue infringing or using your work like they've already infringed. They're already not like playing nice in the sandbox. In this scenario, in my opinion, it's a cease and desist situation, and you can send one yourself. You don't have to have a lawyer send a cease and desist. The stages of kind of infringement are like, communicate with them as kindly as possible. If they don't respond back, which they probably won't because they've already infringed, they're probably just going to keep on keeping on and seeing what you do. Then you send your own cease and desist. And then, of course, if there's still ghosting involved and they don't respond to you, even with like a very specific C&D legal letter, then you have a lawyer send the legal letter on your behalf. And that usually holds a lot of weight and a lot of they will probably respond to that. So yeah, just if anyone has stolen your photographs in any respect, you can send them that cease and desist. Remember, if that occurs and you start seeing things, you might want to start registering those copyrighted images with the Copyright Office if they're starting to use them prior to you, like go file the registration with the U.S. Copyright Office prior to communicating and probably creating a little bit more of a rub with that vendor or venue. And as we discussed earlier, copyright protection starts the moment of that creation of work. So you have common law rights, but if you take legal action, so you can send them to C&Ds, once you are in like lawyer status or pro se status and you're taking legal action against them, you have to own that copyright registration. All right, let's go over all of the key takeaways from today's class, and then we'll get into open Q&A. Ultimately, the choice of whether or not to let a venue or other vendor use your images is up to you. You know your business better than anyone else, and you know what the right moves are. Don't worry about what anyone else has decided to do. Make the choice for yourself based on what's right for your business. If the venue is demanding rights to your photos based on private property rights, know that you have some legal arguments on your end, and I would suggest you try to continue working with them. But if you decide not to use the photos or not to share the photos, you're just in this like to do or not to do, what do I do for marketing purposes? It's a legal situation that gets sticky really fast. But them being able to enforce those rights and for it to hold up in court is going to be an uphill battle for them. And also they would then have to sue you, which I think that's why a lot of photographers take the proceed with caution route. If you do decide to allow the venue to use your photos or other vendor, make sure you're crystal clear with the details of what that limited commercial license to use will entail, either formally with a licensing agreement or informally via email. And if the venue is using those images without your permission, they've never asked you, they got them from somewhere, and you don't want to continue with them under any arrangement or work with them any further, you can issue them a cease and desist. So I hope that I have provided you with a lot of information. That was probably a lot to digest. But I just really want you to weigh the options and make the decision that's right for you. In most circumstances, I highly suggest playing nice with everyone. Usually that bodes well in all cases in the wedding and event industry. And some type of non-exclusive licensing agreement, either formally or in an informal email, is a great way to go. That kind of thing will ensure that you're protected in terms of your copyright ownership as a photographer. But you gotta, every situation is unique. You have to clearly consider and weigh the pros and cons in each situation. But knowing proactively what you want to do, what fee you would charge, how you're going to go about this, what that email is going to look like, getting all of that done now, especially kind of at the beginning of the year. If you are in a location where busy season isn't happening right now, this is a good time to do this and have all of these things ready and at hand. So thank you guys so much. Above all else, I cannot stress this enough. Value your time and your work and your experience and make informed decisions. That's what this class is about today, informed decisions. So thanks for attending. I really, really love you all. You guys, seriously, this community that we have built and I continue to like learn from is so robust. You guys fill my heart here. I can see that you are engaging, you're interacting with me and my legal team. I love helping small business owners run businesses. This is just truly a dream of mine to be able to educate in this respect. I hope it was very helpful for you. Don't forget, you can find me on Instagram at the Legal Page and on Facebook in the TLP community if you'd like to join us. Please tag the Legal Page. And one thing that I would love for you guys, if you're still here, can you put into the chat right now what you loved about this webinar? What is one big thing, big key takeaway that you learned here today that you are going to implement into your business? What did you think about today's legal class? It helps me, like encourages me to keep doing these because there's nothing here that's going on other than free legal education. So yeah, thank you all for joining. If you have any one-on-one questions, know that I can't answer those unless we're in a legal consultation with our law firm. But if you want to ask questions for free, you can go to the Legal Page community on Facebook. Myself and my entire legal team here that you have seen answering questions, they're phenomenal. We monitor our Facebook group, and if you go in there, you'll see it. We're just like firing answers back and forth, as well as almost 10,000 other business owners are in there sharing their feedback and experiences with you all. So, all right. I am going to answer as much Q&A as I can get to. So please put your Q&A in here. My team is going to kind of like, go through them and let me know what are the ones that we really need to answer. Here, okay. The first thing that I want to talk about is when we were talking about this webinar on social media, there was a comment that popped up and I really want to address it. It was a discussion between a venue owner and a photographer, and they were going back and forth. And I was like, I'm going to just talk about this on the webinar. It's not something that's we don't need to get into this like back and forth. But I was like, this is why this webinar is occurring, is there's this rub happening. So this venue said, should we be charging the photographer now for the rights to use our property in their marketing? Like as a subcontractor to the wedding parties, we now need to require the photographer sign a contract with us. Have you seen, it came up in a post again. I just recently saw it yesterday or the day before. This happens with like caterers or people who are like utilizing a lot, like wear and tear on the venues more than other vendors. And that makes sense. There's like a percentage that the venue will take, and like the clients know that, the planners know that, the caterers know that. But is there like a fee that needs to be charged with photographers? Can you as a venue owner? Maybe. My recommendation, and should you? No. Like I said, you already have an uphill battle as a venue to try to pursue legal action against a photographer in court for private property. There's a lot of implied consent here. You already charged your client renting the venue. So like, various vendors are going to be there, including a photographer taking pictures. Absolutely. They're going to be on your site. So I don't think a fee is the right call here. I don't think you should be signing any agreement at the get-go. And I think that was the confusion with this venue, is they were like, oh, so I may have some private property rights. Do I need to enforce those now? This all goes back to this like snowball effect of, I don't even think you need to alert them to this. It's mainly, if it comes up, how do you respond to it after the fact when they're asking for the images? Hopefully that was helpful. No fee, don't recommend it. Okay, this question came in and, oh gosh, this is a long one, but she's on the webinar today. Okay. 2 weeks ago, Hannah had a scenario where the venue had in the client's contract that the client had to give over the rights to the wedding gallery to the venue. Yes. They found out it was in the venue's contract with the couple. So the photographer contacted the venue and explained that the client doesn't own the copyrights and has no idea what they signed over. Okay. Hannah offered to write a written agreement if the venue wanted to use certain images. Love it. The venue said no, that was in their contract was legal and written by an attorney, and they didn't want to work with Hannah any further. How would you go about handling this? Do I send the gallery to all other vendors and kindly communicate to not send the gallery link to any other vendor from this wedding day, but please refer them to me? Yes. That's absolutely what I think you should do. You don't have to send the gallery to other vendors. But in this instance, if you're thinking like, where did they get the images? Did they get them from the clients or did they get them from someone else? Yeah, I think this is a good time to kind of clear the air and probably have all vendors you state your copyright rights. This is that informal kind of licensing agreement. In that respect, maybe like you sent over highlight images. I don't know. I'm thinking like beyond just this scenario. And then you find out that they have other images so that they did go directly to the clients. It's more of that situation where you just need to clear the air there and kindly educate everyone on how that works, everything that we talked about today. Do you inform the couple in this case that the venue asked them for the wedding gallery link? That is stickier. I would really try to work this out with the venue as much as possible. But if the client is kind of already involved, then yeah, you could just respond. I just wouldn't send like the one-off email to the clients. They're going to then be alerted to something that they probably don't need to be involved in anyway. They probably didn't even know that that was in the contract. They just signed it with the venue and booked and moved on. And now it's all popping up. All right. We kind of already went over that. So hopefully I just wanted to wrap that up a little bit nicer. Okay. Someone asked if they joined the webinar late. Is it viewable after the fact? Yes, this whole webinar is recorded and you guys will get access to the replay. Okay, question from Dana. As a planner, what's the best route for us to get photos for our work? I've seen that most photographers have exclusivity rights to be the only photographer present, but there's no guarantee that I'd be able to use the hired photographer's photos. Understandably, I feel it's inappropriate to hire our own photographer, but I feel stuck. This is a great question. Yeah. One, good for you as a planner for knowing about that exclusivity requirement in the contract with the client, right? Because you're probably an all-inclusive planner. You're going through and siphoning through all of these vendor contracts. You're pointing out clear language that you want to make sure that the clients don't violate, and you're doing all this on their behalf. Good for you. If you're seeing that they have exclusivity rights, that is the best way to go about this and communicate with a photographer. Like a photographer is going to be overjoyed that you know that. And you say as a planner, hey, I know you have this in your contract. I want to make sure that I abide by that. And it's really important to me to work with all vendors. Can we come to an agreement here before the wedding or event happens? This event is really important to me. We put a lot of work into it. We would really like to get some images for our own marketing and advertising. How can we make that happen? Is this something that you would, give us 5 to 10 images for our own marketing and advertising for free if we boom, 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 like do some really good things there for the photographer? Or is there a small fee that you charge? Or is there a way that right before the wedding starts and once all of the tablescapes have been put up and we could just bring our own photographer in for 5 minutes prior to any, guests or the clients being alerted to this and we take a few photos for our own usage? Would that be okay? I just want to clear this all up in advance so nothing happens day of that would be inappropriate. Like, any photographer, if you come to them with that, I hope so, is going to be like, I want to work with this person. And how can I work better with this person? And they are coming to me and knowing my copyright rights. Heck yeah. Heck yeah. So that's what I would do, Dana. And kudos to you. That's a good way of handling that. Okay. Sorry. Question from Olivia. If a venue asks for my photos, would it be wise to only provide the venue with my photos if I can be one of their preferred vendors? Like I tell them I can give them my photos if I'm on their list. Yes, like Olivia, this is, again, it's not a one size fits all solution. I think it's also a learning opportunity for you, or maybe you need to do a little bit of digging. What is this venue? Have they been around or established for a while? Do you need to talk to other photographers who have worked there? I would do some digging if I were you and go look on the venue's website. Are they citing photographers? Are they, properly allocating credit to people? go look at those photographers, go DM them, ask them, how did you handle this with the venue in advance? Were they easy to work with? Like, there's a lot of discussion that can be had here so that you have the proper knowledge of how to best communicate with this venue. And be like, I do want to be on their preferred vendor list. Can you give me some suggestions for that? I mean, maybe photographers are like a little too competitive and I would not be that person, but maybe they are. I don't know. Oops, sorry. Business advice from Paige is maybe not the best, but like if you really want to be on their list, you need to come up with a strategic way of suggesting that. And then I would also, you could do it in like a tiered approach too. I'm going to ask a bunch of my photographer educator friends. We have a ton that are affiliates, but they might have the better answer to this. Like I'm thinking, what if you did a tiered approach and you're like, for a fee, I usually charge a fee for each photo. Here's what that is. Here's another way we could go about it non-monetarily wise, or maybe I give you even more images and you add me to the preferred vendor list. So it's like a tiered approach. And of course they're going to take the final option. I don't know. I could be off base, but that's how I would approach it. Again, do your research, try to figure out how you can get on their preferred vendor list. Maybe don't ask photographers, maybe ask their florist that's on a couple florists that are on their preferred vendor list, that kind of thing. Create good relationships with all kinds of people that have worked there. Nicole asks, what do you do if a couple has booked with you, but since you won't sign the venue's photo agreement that they send, the venue doesn't want you to be there? Yeah. This is when you have to get the client involved, because you are already under contract with the client. The client is already under contract with the venue. And at the end of the day, I would present to the venue that I would tell them that you are under no obligation to the venue at this point, and the venue is already under contract with the client, and they're breaching an implied consent usage to the client. I mean, you're using some legal language here, but I would try to work this out with the venue as best as you can before involving the client. And if it gets to the point where you need to chat with the client, then yeah, you probably just need to tell the client that. I've seen situations where the clients do send something to the venue, and if it's a venue that charges a lot of money, which a lot of them do, and that's a really important thing to continue on their booking sheet, they will try to work with the client. And if the client is saying something, then they know that like everybody's involved here and they're not just going to get something out of you for free. So yeah, I mean, in a lot of those instances, and you guys can scroll the Facebook group and like type in these things and see all of the threads in the TLP Facebook community. There's some really good feedback from other photographers who have dealt with this. And they're like, I'm not willing to sign this. And in most instances, they're not just like cut out of the vendor list and like now their client's under breach of contract because they, can't be at the venue. They're usually not going to do that. But I'm glad you're thinking of worst case scenario here. Let's think of worst case scenario and make sure that we are not in worst case scenario situation. Someone's asking, what's interesting to me is that, for example, a venue wouldn't say to a florist, provide me with a floral arrangement for free, but they'll ask, yes. Yeah. And this is like the huge issue that it just has to do with imagery, or it doesn't even happen with videographers as much. It just happens with photographers. And yeah, I mean, there's something about the copyrighted works, and people are trying to claim copyright rights within those works, or they're trying to say we have some other rights that can be invoked here beyond just your copyrighted rights of your images, if that makes sense. So, okay. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. If you have any other questions, reach out to me on Instagram, go to the TLP community on Facebook. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. This was a really fun webinar. I hope you learned a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. That's it. That officially wraps up season 6 and the Legal Paige podcast as a whole. Don't forget that season 7 will premiere on March 11th, and we will be returning officially as the Legally Legit podcast. So be sure to visit thelegalpaige.com for all your contract templates, blogs, other podcasts that you can watch, other YouTube videos that you can watch, and we have all kinds of free additional legal resources. If you haven't already, One thing I would really love for you to do is head over to iTunes and leave a review of this podcast and a rating as well. It truly means so much to me to hear your feedback, and all in all, it helps me continuing on, creating podcast content and getting all of your legal questions answered. I also want to personally invite you to my free Facebook group, the Legal Paige Community. You can go to tlpfacebook.com. We have thousands of business owners in there. You get access to me and my legal team, tons of unlimited and legal Q&A. You can also be a social listener and just see what other people are asking and see all of the answers. The comment threads are so good. So please join us in the Legal Paige Community at tlpfacebook.com. Until next time, my friend.